Greetings, indie warriors and monster tamers alike. Welcome to I Dream of Indie. My name's Old Gamer Joe, bringing you another review today as we look at Monster Crown on the Nintendo Switch. As you may have guessed, this is an RPG that is very clearly influenced by the classic Pokemon games, and it's also been in Steam Early Access since last year. The game takes place in a world where man and monster don't really coexist without the help of divine symbols, which can be applied to a scroll. These scrolls are then sent over to monsters who can either agree to sign the pact and help a human out, or they can not so politely decline and proceed to try and kill you. The first thing you'll be prompted to do in Monster Crown is name your main character. You can choose the gender of that character and between a few different outfits. Just don't expect a ton of customizable options here. That said, if you end up getting sick of the way you dressed your character or you just want to switch things up, you can go back to your wardrobe at any time in your room and change things that way. As you probably could have figured out without me telling you, certain characters in this game have evil intentions, and you're on a quest of your own to train monsters the right way, learn from various mares within the game's world, and try to stop any evildoers that may come your way. You're going to find that Monster Crown's story is mostly told through text in a simplistic style. You do get a few art pieces here or there, but it's very reminiscent to how a Pokemon game would have been told to you on the Game Boy. With that said, whether this was intentional or not, the writing is not very strong here. In fact, it's quite weak. It's hard to tell whether this was intentional due to the game being a retro throwback, because there were a few moments I encountered where it felt at least like the developer wanted you to take the narrative seriously, but the childlike dialogue didn't really mesh well with the game's more serious moments. Before you even get into your general questing, I would recommend at least checking out the game's settings menu, where you can tweak certain aspects of the game in different ways. For one, by default, your experience is going to be split amongst the monsters that you have in your party. You can change this so that if you want to level up certain monsters, prioritize them over others, that is an option. For those of you that just like playing through games and don't always like the challenge that comes along with them, you'll be happy to know that there are a few difficulty options here. You can play on easy, normal, or hard. Obviously, the default is normal, which is what I played on. Should you go to easy, you will be given a few advantages, like not losing a monster to certain trainers, which I'll touch on a little bit more later, and not having limits on when you can heal in towns. The game takes place from a top-down perspective, and generally speaking, gives you a basic idea of what direction you should be heading in. There is a map here that's mediocre at best. It will get labeled at certain points throughout the story. Thankfully, you'll eventually unlock storks as well that can fly you around this world, as well as help you to switch out different monsters. Because yes, it was a bit irritating during the first few hours of this game where you would get new monsters and you might want to put them in your party, but they were sent to the farm and there wasn't a whole lot that you could do about it, for a while anyways. Thankfully, that is eventually remedied. As you wander about, you can push a single button in order to activate dash. I recommend leaving this on at all times. It actually startled me a bit at first because I thought the game had just sped up on me. There's plenty of glitches, which I'll get into in a moment here, but no, just trigger that dash button because that's the best movement speed for this game, at least in my opinion. I don't really see a reason why you would want to walk. As you wander about, you'll also learn that you can activate certain abilities for your monsters by using the R button along with the minus button, which is extremely clunky. I don't really understand what they were thinking, the way they've mapped this to your controller, but essentially the idea here is that you can have your monster sit down and then feed them pumpkins. You can have your monster scout areas for enemies that are too powerful for you to contend with, and I just found the implementation to be poorly executed and completely unnecessary. Outside of exploring the various towns, interacting with townsfolk who don't really have all that much to say, and exploring caves and other areas of the game, the main draw here is going to be in the combat system. This is going to be a turn-based combat system, of course, and just as you could in a Pokemon game, you can cycle through various monsters, of which you can hold up to 8 at a time. To gain new monsters, you'll first need to wound your enemies and then toss a pact at them, which they'll hopefully sign and join you. I really found the combat to feel slow, at least on the Nintendo Switch. Sometimes the text would take a while to load in. I'm not exactly sure what was going on here, but yeah, each monster, of course, has its own individual health bar, which you'll need to keep an eye on. You can access items with a press of the X button to try to heal and such, and each monster has its own unique set of attacks that can be utilized. You'll also notice that next to a monster's name is a little symbol which indicates what type of enemy you're dealing with. Certain enemies will be more vulnerable to certain attacks. On the flip side, that works the same for you, so you'll have to try and remember all the different enemy types, or else you can find yourself getting one-shotted pretty easily, which happened to me plenty of times. As far as leveling up, like I mentioned, you gain experience after each battle, but there is a cap in place here, and that cap is going to remain in place until you defeat the chiefs that are in various towns around around the world. If the chief happens to defeat you, they can steal one of your monsters, but if you defeat them, your cap will raise by about 10 levels or so you can gain more experience and make your monsters stronger. I actually thought this was a pretty cool idea that works effectively enough. What I didn't like so much were the really nasty, grindy difficulty spikes that would come seemingly out of nowhere at times, and I would just be completely wiped out by an enemy when I wasn't expecting it. In total, though, there are a lot of monsters for you to try to collect, actually over 200 of them. I'm just not so sure that a lot of players are going to make it that far in this game, because while this is an over 20-hour-long quest, boy, does it have some technical shortcomings that truly hold it back. As I walked about the game's maps, my character would skip frames entirely, which led me to eventually having a massive headache. When I tried to rest at a campfire at one point, the game locked up completely. Was I supposed to wait for the sun to rise? In another instance, my character was stuck in place entirely, and I totally lost it at that point and did perform a rage quit. Thank goodness you can save the game at any time, because if I didn't have that option, I would have lost a lot of progress, and I would have gave up a lot sooner. With my spirit broken, battered, and beaten from the game's horrible performance on my aging Switch, I looked for answers by testing the handheld mode, but that didn't help at all. I don't know if this is a pre-patch build or what, but this was one of the worst performances I've seen on the Switch, and that's saying something. I could live with the occasional load time, but even the battles would feel stuck in mud as I waited for the text to load in, and as it stands, at the time of this review, on this specific build, I can't speak to the public build, Monster's Crown was an absolute technical nightmare. This is really a shame, because there are some charming pixelated graphics here that are masked by the hitches, the glitches, and the outright breaking of this game. It was frustrating because you can see the skeleton of a solid title here. I think with some refinements, this combat could be pretty good. I absolutely love the chiptune soundtrack that's straight out of the era that it's so desperately trying to emulate, but it's a game that just doesn't feel ready for review, let alone launch on the Switch. My personal advice here would be to only jump in early if you're absolutely desperate for another Pokemon-esque game on your Switch. As it stands, you have way better options like the excellent Nexomon series, which run properly. Sadly, this one at this moment is wearing the crown of shame. Thank you so much for watching the latest video from I Dream of Indie. We would now like to take a moment to thank our great indie warriors who support us through channel memberships and keep the lights on here at I Dream of Indie. Mitchell Hall, Bunny, Kevilo, Bill T, Christian Cruz, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, Adriana Amato, CJR, PSC, C Coil, Skeptism, Jen Rose, Jesse, CPM, Julian Colbus, JRS the 8th, Raylan, and Marky Mint. Thank you so much for all you do for independent developers, publishers, and for I Dream of Indie. Everybody else, please head down to the description box below. Let's defeat the gaming echo chamber and bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming.